self-paced onboarding plan. So a very common pain that I hear is that the onboarding process is all over the place. So when I talk to HR managers about how they structure their onboarding, they usually tell me that it's really all over the place. It's hard to collect all of the information. There isn't a centralized base where all of the information and all of the materials sit. There isn't really a way to communicate with the hiring manager and make sure that we're aligned, that what HR is doing and what the manager is doing and what the buddy is doing, that it's all really pushing in the same direction. And very often it feels like we're randomly going about the onboarding and everybody is trying to do something and trying their best, but it's not really structured in a plan type of way or like a project-based onboarding. And that's what I want to talk about in this section is how do we create an onboarding plan? Like, why do we need one? And what are some of the tools and systems that we need to have in place in order to be able to build an onboarding plan for every new hire? In order for us to understand how do we build an onboarding plan and what an onboarding plan is, we need to look at some of the stakeholders that are involved when we're onboarding a new hire. And these are going to be relevant regardless of the type of organization you're in, like the industry, the size, regardless of the role that you're hiring, you're almost always going to have these people involved in onboarding any new hire that comes into your organization. The first one is going to be obviously the HR team. At least someone from the HR team has to be involved in onboarding. We're going to have the hiring manager, so the direct manager to whom the new hire is going to be reporting. They're going to have a role in onboarding always. The new hire itself, obviously, they're going to have a very big role in onboarding because they need to be proactive, and we want them to push this onboarding as well and to be curious and proactive and really do a lot of the work as well. In some cases, not always, but we're going to have a buddy or maybe even someone from the team or department. Maybe it's not a formal buddy, but it's kind of a peer. So someone who is with them on the team who's going to help them on board. So these are the players that we have that are helping our new hire get productive and get integrated into the company culture. And when I talk to companies and when I talk to HR professionals, what tools do you have and how do you onboard people? What do you usually do? They start listing some of these, which you see on the top here, which is, I'll call them level 1 tools. There's always something for communication. So it's like Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, whatever. There's email, which is always a big one, Slack, Zoom, any of these communication tools. And then there's a lot of PDFs, spreadsheets, slides, decks, docs, all of that. So we have tools for documents and resources and materials, and then tools for communication. And trying to align all of these stakeholders using all of these tools becomes practically impossible. And that's the reason why we get a feeling that our onboarding is all over the place, because we're trying to manage a project that's really not manageable. We have too many tools, too many communication channels, and too many stakeholders that are not really aligned and don't really know what is it that they need to be doing and how can they work together towards the same goal, which is to help a new hire be onboarded, get a hang of what they need to do in their job, and also become a part of the culture. Now, you have some companies that I call these level 2 tools that are a little bit more advanced, and you'll see these in slightly bigger companies where they already have some type of HR system, like an HRIS software. So we see here HiBob, Bamboo HR, Gusto, any one of these, whichever HRIS you have. A lot of them have an onboarding feature attached to it. So then those companies would say, oh, we have this HRIS that we're already paying, usually a lot of money, and it has an onboarding feature. So they almost feel obligated to use that feature just because they're already paying for the software. The problem with these softwares and the onboarding feature is that, first of all, these are not onboarding software. They're not designed with the purpose of onboarding. They're designed to be an overall HR software, and then onboarding is just one of the features, which tells you a little bit about the quality of the feature when it's just one of the many things that the software does. But even more than that, some of the challenges that we see with using specialized software or HR software is that they're still adjusted towards a checklist. So they're useful for an admin side of onboarding, making sure that contracts are signed, that the person has their laptop, that they've logged into the accounts, that kind of thing. They're not really adjusted for training and development, and they're definitely not adjusted for cultural integration. So those things usually don't happen in those softwares. You don't have those options. Another big challenge that we see is that managers don't really care about them, and it's really hard to get hiring managers to care about using an HR software because they see it as an HR software, which is HR's job to use an HR software. And then what happens is that we have the orientation part, the part of onboarding that sits with HR happens in the HR software, but then the managers go rogue and then they use their own tools. So then still we have a process that's all over the place, which at the end of the day costs us in terms of the quality of experience that we can deliver for our new hire. Also, speaking of new hires, a lot of them have never used these softwares, these HR specific tools, and especially if you're hiring juniors, they barely use normal tools. Like a lot of them come to the office, especially if it's their first job, they barely know how to use email. And then the first thing we give them is that we give them this super specialized tool, and we expect them to be able to navigate it from day one, which again creates a lot of anxiety and not a really good experience for our new hires, and not a high quality process for them in terms of the onboarding. And the last one, as I said, at the end of the day, even with all of these fancy tools, it still ends up being a check the box activity where the new hire goes into the tool, they get a list of tasks they need to do, which are mostly admin, and then they just check. And once they've checked all of it, it's done. There's not a system to track the process. There's not a system to keep each other accountable in terms of the manager, HR, the employee. We don't know who's doing what. We're not really aligned towards the same goals. We just have a checklist that's somewhere in the software that barely anyone looks at. And this is reality of most companies, is that these are the tools that we're working with. We have level 1, which are chaotic and all over the place. And then we have level 2, which are a little bit better, but still not really what we need. Now, what I want to propose is a special set of tools that I like to use for onboarding that are actually quite available and that everyone has. So it would fit into level 1 tools. We just don't always think about it as an onboarding tool. And this is where we get to talking about having a centralized base for our onboarding using one of our project management tools that we already have in the organization. So most companies have some tool for project management. It could be ClickUp, it could be Notion, it could be Asana, it could be Trello, it could be any of these, doesn't really matter. And the benefits of using these tools is that first, we only have one tool. So we centralize everything and we say, we do onboarding through Notion, and that's it. So everyone who's involved in onboarding, all of the stakeholders, the HR team, the hiring manager, the new hire, the buddy, all of us are centralized around Notion because onboarding happens in Notion, for example, if you're using Notion. That's the first thing. The second thing is that these tools are, we're expecting the new hire to use these tools later on in their job. So if this is the tool that we're using for project management, it's only natural that we use it for onboarding, and then it will naturally evolve to be the tool that they use for project management. So if they have experience with the tool, perfect, they're already set up. If not, then they're learning a tool that they're going to be using anyway. So we're not learning it just for onboarding. They're learning how to use the tool because they're also going to need it later on when they're managing their projects. So that's a win. Second thing is that it's really the onboarding, when we start using project management tools, the onboarding becomes a project. So it has a timeline. We can set some goals to it. There are different stakeholders that interact with the project at certain times. Everybody who is a part of the onboarding has a role and they need to contribute to the project. So now we're talking in terms that are familiar to everyone. So it's not this mysterious thing, which is the onboarding and how do we do it. It's a project like any other project that we're doing. There's someone who's managing the project, there are goals, there are deadlines, there are different roles in the project, and we're all trying to contribute to this common goal, which is, again, to get the new hire productive. So I really believe that using your own project management system as your onboarding software is the most cost-effective way because you already have it, and it's also the most effective way because it's really the best way to get your new hire to go through the program and have this structured, standardized, self-paced type of onboarding. Another thing that I like about these tools and why I highly recommend them is that they make it very easy to copy-paste projects. Meaning that if you create an onboarding plan in Notion for one new hire, and then you have another one starting next week, you can just copy-paste the project and you're basically already ready for the next new hire. Maybe a couple of tweaks here and there. We'll talk about it in chapter 3, but basically it allows you to easily iterate and easily copy. So it's not a lot of admin work, again, when you're onboarding at scale, which is really important. Now, the question that this opens is that, okay, I buy into this. I believe into this. There's a project that needs to be managed. Who is going to manage the project? Who is going to build this onboarding plan? And what do we actually put inside of the onboarding plan? And that's the last question that we're going to answer today.